You're listening to 88.7 WLUW Chicago Sound Alliance, broadcasting from the campus of Loyola University. It's live from the Heartland, featuring Michael James and Katy Hogan. On today's show, we'll have conversations with Matt Martin, a 47th Aldermanic Ward runoff candidate, Kimberly Gordon, a jazz singer, and Kelly Cassidy, a state representative. Thank you so much for listening, and enjoy the show.
Fight, no more tear, no more pain, no more fear. I got to make my move. Get out.
Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, hermanos y hermanos, bienvenido and welcome to another edition of the Live from the Heartland show. We're broadcasting here from the WLUW studios down here at 26 East Pearson. I'm here with Katy Hogan. Our buddy Tom Clark is out doing some other important work today. And we're going to have a great show. We have Matt Martin. He's the 47th Aldermanic Ward runoff candidate. And we're going to have the wonderful jazz singer who performs Sunday nights at Le Piano, Kimberly Gordon. And we are so honored to have our state rep from the 14th District, Kelly Cassidy. She's going to fill us in on marijuana legislation, et cetera, et cetera. So stay tuned for the next hour. We're going to have a real good time. Good morning to you, Katy Hogan.
Good morning, Michael. Happy to be here with you, and happy to really pivot directly to Matt Martin, who's one of the close and exciting aldermanic runoff races that are going to be decided on April 2nd, along with the mayoral. Welcome to Live from the Heartland, Matt.
Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, you're a youngster.
A little bit.
I love it. We love having this potentially much younger city council happening. How exciting is this that you're at this point and that you got here? How do you feel?
I feel pretty great. I am a little bit tired, but I've got more than enough adrenaline coursing through my veins to keep me going. So, we've been doing this for over a year, and it's great to be 10 days out.
Wow, over a year. So what was the spread between you and your next runner-up?
Yeah, we got almost 40% of the vote in a very crowded 9-way race, and the second-place finisher got about 21%.
That would mean that you should be very confident, I think, right?
But not too confident.
We don't take anything for granted. The approach that we've taken from really the 27th of February was we have to earn all those votes back, because I think with that crowded race, and there were a number of strong candidates, we know that for some people it might have been we were the only candidate they spoke with. They had a great experience with some of our volunteers, and so we want to make sure that we're getting to them often again, that I'm talking with them as many times as I can, because we don't want to be the campaign that finds a way to get 40% and then finds a way to lose.
Oh, yeah. Very smart. Very smart. Tell us about where you're from and why you're running.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Tucson, Arizona. My parents met while my dad was studying at the university there, the University of Arizona, and my mom was working there. And he's from West Africa, a country called Niger, was and remains one of the poorest in the world. And so for me, when I think about why I'm running, it's to make sure that I have access, that everybody in our neighborhood, in our city, has access to the things that I did growing up, which was being close to a great school, being able to walk to a great strip of businesses, one of which gave me my first job, scooping ice cream. And,
right on.
Yeah, ice cream scooper.
Yeah, so the power of small businesses, I think, we need to be doing more of that, and need to not nibble around the edges, not maintaining the status quo, but really getting bold and independent in terms of this political space that city council is occupying.
So, but your ward includes one of the most developed and lovely shopping districts, Lincoln Square, at least on our side of the city. Mm-hmm. So what do you need that you don't know? You've got the Old Town School, you've got Sulzer Library. I mean, you're pretty set.
Well, we've got so we've got wonderful anchor businesses like that, but there are always ways to improve. I think one, we have a number of vacant storefronts, and the number of those is increasing as you have developers who are wanting to charge rents that are well above market because they've got these huge real estate portfolios, and they say, if we're not going to get a huge, crazy rent, we'll just take that loss and offset it against other things in our portfolio. So that's wrong. And then I think really is affordability. It's the biggest short-term challenge facing our part of the city. You're losing 2 and 3 flats. You're losing modest single-family homes.
Right. No, that's and how does affordable housing shake out in your ward? I know it's a big issue and possibly a bigger issue in many other parts of the city, but it's a big one that we all were talking about during the first part of the election. Mm-hmm. What are our tools to helping amass more.
Yeah. So there are a number of tools that we have at our disposal already, and others that we need to bulk up a little bit. So one would be making sure that we're working aggressively to preserve 2 and 3 flats, to make sure that we have multifamily housing. So that can mean removing the ban on non-conforming units, so allowing coach houses, granny flats to be in place, working with the Community Investment Corporation to make sure that we have low or no interest loans for folks who want to maintain or purchase those 2 or 3 flats. And then when you look more structurally, you see way too high a reliance on property taxes. With those going up, mine have gone up almost 100% over the last 5 years. That means that folks who have been there for a generation or two are getting priced out. And the people who can afford those skyrocketing property taxes too often are folks who are of means, and we need that economic diversity. I think that reflects our values. It's what our small businesses need. So we need to get really aggressive. We can't nibble around the edges.
You know, I like to go back to the biography a little bit. So when you were in Arizona, you grew up there, and then where did you go to school, and what led you to go to school wherever you went, and what did you study, etc.?
I went to Northwestern. That's what brought me out to the Chicago area, because in high school I was a musician. I played jazz saxophone, and so I wanted to do that in college, but I didn't want to do that exclusively. So I had the opportunity to apply to a few schools, Northwestern included, that had great double degree programs where you could do both music as well as something in the arts and sciences. So I did political science, and by the end of my time at Northwestern, while I loved music, I knew that probably not enough people would want to pay to hear me play professionally, so I would need to find something else. So I ended up studying law, and that's led me to the track I'm in right now.
You know, you're running in the 47th Ward, and that was there used to be a guy named Ed Kelly who was a big powerhouse in the Democratic Party, and it was a solid kind of a machine ward. What's that ward like now? I mean, it's Rahm's home base. You know, just tell us what the demographics are and how it's shifted from the time when it was an Ed Kelly ward.
Yeah, so it's not as ethnically diverse as it used to be, and I think a big driver for that is the rising cost of housing.
Right.
But it still has a lot of economic diversity. People sometimes forget that while maybe there are some $1 million homes there, there's also very modest housing, and I think that that's wonderful, that it is an economic melting pot, but we need to make sure it stays that way. It's a ward from a political standpoint. I think it's kind of a sleeping progressive giant. Bernie did really, really well there in the Democratic primary. Daniel Biss got well over 50%. And so I think that shows me and shows other people in the ward that we don't just want to talk about great policy. We want to put it in place. We want to be, I think, part of a coalition of leadership with the Progressive Caucus to make sure that we really see a sea change politically in our city.
When you become the alderman, what kind of position might you take on the Lincoln Yards, the Cop Academy, the things that seemingly have been rammed through the city council before the big change?
Yeah, I plan on joining the Progressive Caucus and working aggressively with them to make sure that those projects stop. Because with Lincoln Yards, how is it the case that we can find over $1 billion for development that already would be happening regardless of TIFs, but that we're closing 50 schools, that we're closing half of our mental health clinics, that we're ticketing thousands of Chicagoans into bankruptcy? That's not right, and it doesn't have to be that way.
It's already that way. It's been that way.
Yeah.
So how do we undo it?
I think it starts by getting good people elected who aren't just going to criticize, but who are going to propose alternate ways forward, and then get down and dirty to make sure that you're building coalitions so that you're playing hardball and making sure that stuff actually happens.
So this morning on the news, the Sterling Bay folks now want to build something about 47 stories high on 300 North Michigan. Same people who are doing the Lincoln Yards. One of the things that is really hard, I think, for most of us who don't make $50,000 a year, at all, is to see the development of this incredible income and whole gap. It's dangerous. It feels to the democracy to have the very, very rich and the result of what some people call Mayor 1% happening right here in Chicago, a formerly working class bastion. Where is the working class? And do we even get to talk to each other anymore? Because so many had to move so far out to get near jobs.
Yeah, so part of it is just the trends at the national level in terms of our economy. You have a hollowing out of the middle class, and WBZ had one of those hot maps a few weeks ago where they showed 1970 versus today, the hollowing out of a city that used to be solidly middle class, and now it's the tale of two cities. And that's becoming more and more the case on a daily and weekly basis, in part based on the policies that you were mentioning. And so I think what we need to do is to track it, to make sure that we have great aldermen and women who can make wonderful development decisions at the local level with the community input in mind, front and center. But then it also means at the city level that we have something like a master plan in place that cities like Pittsburgh have, so that we don't have the same sorts of unproductive conversations where the Department of Planning and Development says, we view our job as transactional. Lincoln Yards wants to have, like the Sterling Bay wants that to happen, and we'll figure out a way. Instead, it's how do we want development to happen equitably all across the city, not just in and around the downtown area.
Matt Martin, I like to know things like who influenced you in your life. I mean, what political figures, musical figures, anybody that had some kind of big impact on you?
Yeah, so it starts with my mom, to be honest. She raised me by herself really from day one, and is someone who has, I think, a deep and unwavering sense of justice that manifested itself in ways both big and small. It meant with a homeless population that was quite large in Arizona, always finding opportunities to provide people food when they asked, making sure that she was volunteering consistently.
Was she raised in Arizona?
No, she was raised in the Bay Area, a large Irish Catholic family. And so I think social justice...
Another Irish Catholic.
You're kind of a Barack model here, I hate to say. You know, the studying abroad student, the nice Irish Catholic girl. All right. Yeah, very nice. All right, sorry, I interrupted. You were talking about her commitment to social justice.
Yeah, and so that's something that has always impacted me in terms of how I spend my time, how I choose to engage with people, especially professionally. And so I now work at the Illinois Attorney General's office, where I've worked on issues including police reform, pay equity for low-wage workers, and opposing lots of the policies coming out of the Trump administration, especially around immigration and healthcare. And so I think for me, it's been an education, first starting with music and then going on to policy and politics. And I think one person who really, I think, lit a fire under me was a man named Tom Gagan, who's a labor lawyer, civil rights attorney.
He's been in that seat too.
Yeah, so I worked on his congressional campaign when he ran to replace Ron when Ron went to go be chief of staff. And, and I was his body person, so made sure he was on time to everything and accompanied him to all his events and in between those events, riding in the car with him, walking and hearing about the things where he was talking about transformational change at the federal level, and I think we need more of that here at the city level.
So that lit your fire. After being the body man for Gagan, you couldn't not do politics?
For our listeners, just tell people who Gagan is and how you pronounce his name. I always had a hard time.
You just did.
Okay.
You did.
Yeah, Tom Gagan. So he's a longtime labor lawyer, civil rights activist, works at the firm of Dupre, Schwartz, and Gagan. Dupre is Leon Dupre.
Who also was interviewed on this show, I'm so proud to say.
Yeah. And for many years, the only independent person on the council under first Mayor Daley in the Hyde Park area. And so the two of them, along with Tom Schwartz, put together this fantastic law firm that Tom runs to this day.
And he has a great book out, as I recall.
A number of them.
That's when we interviewed him when his book was coming out.
It wasn't that chair. It was at the Heartland Cafe. Just
it's true, but
historical accuracy.
The chair is still the guest chair. Yeah. Okay, we'll stop bickering on air. There is a lot of interest out there in an elected school board. What do you think about that? What's your approach?
It's a no-brainer. This should have happened years ago. And I mean, most of the people in the city want it. Most of the elected officials want it. And we have to be honest. The person who didn't want it was the mayor, and that carried the day. And I think that was wrong. And so when we look at the lessons that we can learn and apply those lessons going forward, it means we need to make sure that with this next city council, it recognizes that it's a strong city council model that we have in Chicago. If you have 26 votes, you get to determine the direction that the city's on. And so with the elected school board, we can talk about system design to make sure that you don't have lots of charter money going in the way that's happened in LA. But at the end of the day, we need this because right now an unelected school board means that you have crises like almost on a monthly basis.
What's your stand or position on a casino in the city?
So it's not top of mind for me in terms of how we bring in more revenue in the city, but I think all options should be on the table, because that's when people say you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do that, all we're left with are property taxes and other regressive fees, and that's led us to the point where it's unsustainable. Our city is hurting, we're in pain, and we need to have an honest, transparent conversation about how we can bring in revenue, but do so in a way that reflects our values.
You're listening to Live from the Heartland, WLUW 88.7 FM, Chicago Sound Alliance, and we're talking with a great candidate in the runoff open seat in the 47th Ward, Matt Martin. Matt, do you have any other touchy-feely questions you want to ask Michael?
Touchy-feely. Oh, yeah, well, let's go back to the jazz. Like the saxophone player, who are some of the jazz guys you like the most? And I just want to point out that our engineer, Jake Levy, is also a jazz saxophonist, and he'll give us the information, but they're putting on he's with a little trio or group going to play up at the Loyola soon, and we want people to know about it. We'll get that information and bring it to you after a break.
Okay, so back to...
That was touchy-feely?
No, that wasn't.
He's got an answer.
Okay.
Who are the jazz guys?
Yeah, so it starts with Charlie Parker, Lester Young, of course, and then went on to John Coltrane, Sonny Rollins, Sonny Stitt, and then Joe Henderson and Branford Marsalis were two of the more recent ones who I really appreciated listening to, as well as transcribing and really getting into it, figuring out what made them them.
Wow. Branford has really done many good things with his career. Okay, back to the other things. State Charter School Commission has dipped into a lot of aldermanic races this year. Didn't work in our ward. We had already done a referendum to put a moratorium on charter school expansion in the 49th. What is the charter school place in our educational system citywide? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so right now it's definitely doing that moratorium and really rethinking the entire model, because with a school system that's so starved for resources right now, we need to be talking about how we continue to invest in our local public schools. Here in the 47th Ward, based on this evidence-based funding formula that Springfield passed a few years ago, each one of our elementary schools are underfunded by $1 million. Our high schools are underfunded by over $5 million. Right. And so we just need to bring in more revenue to support those schools, many of which are already strong, but I think that's where the conversation needs to start.
How many TIFs in 47?
Ooh, I don't know off the top of my head. I think between 5 and 10. But
okay, that wasn't a gotcha question, but it follows funding for schools. If we had less TIFs holding tax dollars, we'd have better funded schools. No?
I think so.
Yeah.
And Amaya Pawar, who's our current alderperson, I think that he's done a decent job managing TIFs as they are in terms of, whenever possible, steering those resources to our schools. Some of the problems I have with the TIF model, though, even when you're doing laudable things like that, is it goes to building improvements. But what happens if you need up-to-date technology and textbooks?
Right.
What happens if your class sizes are over 30 or students with special needs don't have classroom assistants? You can't use TIF funds on that. And that's where you think, what's the highest and best use of all these resources? It's great to have a new playground, but sometimes we need that money. It's better spent inside of the classroom.
And we only have time for one more question.
I think I just lost what I was thinking.
Okay, environmental. You can find it again. Don't we need an environmental? What's the word? Department that Rahm eliminated. Don't we need that in this city? We're sitting on, our part of 20% of the world's fresh water supply.
Mm-hmm. We absolutely do. Yeah, no question. I think that, and there's so many ways in which that overlaps with other departments in terms of building, making sure that we always have green features with our new developments. Also making sure that we are doubling down on investing in transportation. Bus rapid transit, for example. It's for communities that are lacking L and Metro stops. And I think when we're also looking about emissions, so making sure that we're going zero emission as quickly as possible, collaborating with other cities to hold ourselves accountable. The Department of the Environment can take the lead on that.
Matt Martin, in the 40th Ward, there was a debate between the candidates, and in the 49th Ward, there was a debate between the candidates. Are there any plans to do that in the 47th?
So we already had a big one. It was
Okay.
at the Davis Theater, I think about 2 weekends ago. I'd have to talk with my team. I just go where they tell me to go, and they prep me ahead of time. But to my knowledge, I don't think that we have another forum planned with just 10 days left.
So we did not use all of our time well with you, so we're definitely going to have you back once you get elected. But of great concern to us is whether or not you could help change the blue code of silence surrounding policing in Chicago, and if that's a priority to you.
Yeah, it's one of the biggest reasons why I decided to run, because at the Attorney General's office, we sued the city of Chicago and the police department. So I wrote the complaint that we filed. I helped find the experts that we've been relying upon, and then helped draft the consent decree that's going into place. And so I see this as a real opportunity for transformational change with policing especially.
Yeah. Matt, thank you so much. We've been talking to Matt Martin, candidate in the 47th Ward aldermanic runoff. Only a week and 2 days to
April
go.
2nd.
So everybody get out and vote. And thanks so much. We could do a lot longer.
We're glad to meet you, and we wish you really well.
Thank you very much.
Indeed.
Okay, we're going to take a little musical break.